right into the beginning of this evening. My name is Laura Ritchie, and I'm the exhibitions manager here at the Art Gallery of Alberta. And on behalf of the gallery, I want to welcome you all and thank you for joining us for tonight's program, Our City of Queer Champions.
Welcome to Pride 2014. Tonight's presentation is looking at and is dealing a bit with the whole notion of queer people, their places, events that help to build Edmonton's queer community. And it's a bit of a teaser. It's to get us to think about some of the things that you already know or may not know about that they will talk about.
I should say I'm kind of the sporty spice. I've basically been a sports enthusiast my whole life, long before I knew I was a lesbian. In 1995, with help, I started a lesbian out touch football team, and we played in a 7-league team, and we were out to everyone in the league. Then later on, started a gay softball team, and we weren't really in a league per se, as it was kind of a pickup game, just kind of played each other, as it were. And it was really important to me to have a safe space where we could use our own language and cultural references and without fear. The most inspiring part of that team for me was watching the guys play. So many young gay men wouldn't play sports because they were, too much fear of being beat up or made fun of or what have you, and watching a big queen run around the bases and realizing he could play ball was really awesome. So then that led to playing in the Gay Cup, inspired by Michael actually, where we played the city police once a year at Gay Pride.
Good.
Thanks.
Thank you. And some of us were cheerleaders, right?
Hot cheerleaders.
Yes.
Real hot cheerleaders.
Hot cheerleaders, very hot. And now we will move next.
I'm Reverend Dr. Charles Bidwell, and for 11 years I was minister of Metropolitan Community Church of Edmonton, serving the LGBT community. I was also a peer counselor at Gay Alliance Toward Equality, the predecessor of the AIDS and the Pride Center. And I'm now spiritual advisor to Camp Firefly. I moved here 40 years ago from Baltimore with my wife and 2 children to work at the University of Alberta's Faculty of Medicine. I left my marriage when the kids were in university and came out into the LGBT community in 1981, right at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic. So I've worked to bring comfort to individuals who are dying from AIDS and helping their friends and families to create memorial services for them. My husband of 7 years died of AIDS in 1989.
Thank you very much. You don't know that my undergraduate degree is from Baltimore. So we will move on to Dr. Warnicki.
Warnicki.
Warnicki, sorry.
He always does that.
I know, it's true.
Yeah, I'm a gay male, obviously. I grew up on a farm in the middle of Alberta at a very homophobic time, and with my parents who were very traditional. So my only solace at that time was the Eaton's catalog in the men's underwear section.
Very fashionable.
But it was great. It was great. And it was also Simpsons Ears. But sadly, I was in the closet when I went to university throughout university years. I had one colleague of mine, and he won't mind me saying this, Dr. Larry Jewell, came out while I was in my final year of medicine. I envied him for his courage, but I remained in the closet with all this internalized hate and shame and so on. I was in a relationship for 15 years, but it was a closeted relationship, and it fell apart in the early 80s when I started to become more of an activist. I thought enough was enough. So in the early 80s, I kind of came out and started to be an activist for gay rights and so on. I offered my services to individuals who were gay, lesbian, who wanted to see a psychiatrist that was gay, lesbian positive and transgender positive. I didn't see too many individuals, as it turned out, for counseling, because I think that as was determined a long time ago, but the majority of gays are quite happy, thank you very much, and quite well adjusted, thank you very much. And so there was no work there for me. But there were a number of individuals who, especially males, who were being denied access, reasonable access to their children. They'd been in a marriage and so on. And the ex-wife was holding the gay issue against them. And there was about 8 or 10 cases over the years, and that I was able to assess and make a recommendation. And I'm pleased to say that all 8 cases were won. I started to see transgender patients back in 1978, and then stopped it for a few years. And then because of pressure, I opened a clinic for transgender patients in 1996. For a while, I was the only psychiatrist in Alberta, so I had about a 2-year waiting list. Let's see, so that's my claim to fame. I've actually seen over 1,400 patients since 1996. Actually, not all of them were transgendered. The vast majority were. Not all of them wanted to have any kind of surgery, but probably about 2/3 of them went in that direction. And I've been involved in a lot of other medical things as well over the years. I was on the AIDS Network on the board for 2-3 years, thanks to Larry Jewell, who insisted I should do something in that area. I was on the AIDS committee within the hospital. All the hospitals were struggling with this phenomenon at the time, and I managed to convince them to just simply adopt universal precautions to remove any kind of stigma that might come otherwise.
I am Prairie Fairy from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. Moved to Edmonton in 1990, and prior to that, was in a relationship with my former partner. We were together for the better part of 20 years or so. But when I moved to Edmonton in 1990, I decided I can't do the closet anymore. I was married, I had 2 kids, and I managed Glenn Murray's campaign. He was the first gay guy to run for office in Winnipeg. And when I moved here, Darcy and I didn't know anybody in Edmonton. And Glenn Murray said, well, Michael Fair wants to run for city council, maybe you can help out there. And the rest is kind of history, right?
Watching the men play, one fellow in particular, and I'm not outing anybody out of turn or anything, he's a very dear friend, his name's Blair Lloyd. He's a very large gay man, but a very effeminate gay man. And he'd never played ball before in his life. He wanted to, hardly had done any sports at all really in his whole life, because he was way too afraid of being beat up, because he was kind of Nelly. And he got up to bat for the first time, and swoosh a swing and a miss, and swoosh a swing and a miss, and I think he let one ball go by, but anyway, eventually really knocked it out of the park. A triple, which is 3 bases for those people who don't know. And he just couldn't believe it. He was screaming and tears were coming down his face as he's running around the bases. And well, it was just so fabulous to see. It was just really, really heartwarming for me. And lots of other guys, similar kinds of things. And Blair continued to scream. It was a bit of beginner's luck, but every time he was at bat, when he would run to first, whether he got a good hit or a not so good hit, he would run for all he was worth, screaming with his hands above the air, trying to make sure the first baseman, if they made the throw, that the first base person didn't make the catch. Women, lesbians or not, I think, but particularly lesbians, I guess, we could be butch girls and be sporty girls even before we knew we were lesbians. Whereas the guys, funnily enough, I lean more to the guy side, because they didn't have those opportunities. It gave them opportunities. When they were young, they couldn't. The women, I mean, like I say, I was a sporty girl my whole life, and you didn't get called names for that. You got called an athlete. It's funny how it's a juxtaposition of that. but the guys, really were able to shine because of that. And I think it also led to what is now, part of what I did, led to what is now Team Edmonton, the umbrella group of all the different sports groups that there are. It's a whole lot of fun. It wasn't competitive at all, even when we played the city police. As much as we did want to win.
Yes, well, we won a number of times.
We did win a number of times, but it was as much about the camaraderie as it was
With the cheerleading.
as the winning. Yes, absolutely. Michael forced the city police to, when they had a strikeout, which they had many. They had to wear his boa, big bright pink boa. It was fabulous. They wore it reluctantly, but they did wear it.
Charles, tell us a little bit about the queer faith and how the spiritual needs of the queer community was served.
Well, I coached the members of Metropolitan Community Church of Edmonton to reach out to anyone who was suffering from disease or discrimination, and often they were experiencing both. Trying to see the brother or sister in the other person and work to make a more compassionate society here in Edmonton. Most of the people attending our services had felt rejection from their home faith communities, and so our services were ecumenical, trying to help people from all denominations feel at home in the faith community of MCC. We held our first prayer vigil for persons affected by AIDS, and when the AIDS network was forming, it was MCC Edmonton who held their grant money in trust until they were able to get charitable society status. Well, as I said earlier, we tried to visit and support those who were affected by AIDS, individuals and partners and close friends and family, when they were accepting of our offers of support. We did what we could to educate ourselves about the virus so that we would understand how to relate to those who had it, as well as to understand that it was not God's punishment for being gay, as some churches proclaimed at the time. We offered and conducted many memorial services, and we also provided a ritual called Holy Union for those couples who wanted to have their committed relationships publicly blessed.
And I think there's a picture of one of the first ones you did?
Yes, 1998. They're here tonight.
Yes. It's Craig and Craig and yeah, behind me, Bo. Mark.
95.
Some of us volunteered to be visible as Christians in the Pride parades. Some of us volunteered to share our stories and faith with many faith communities that would invite us to help them understand that sexual orientation was natural and inborn. These were mainly United Churches that were studying the discrimination of gays prior to voting on accepting openly gay and lesbian student clergy. The biggest push came from Reverend Bert and Evelyn Fry, a straight couple who were chagrined at the hatred against LGBT folks, and who gathered like-minded and open-hearted people together to form the Diversity Conferences of Alberta Society. DCAS then, starting in 1998, held educational conferences with speakers and panels from various Christian denominations, and for several years did this at Grant MacEwan Community College. We hoped that these conferences would empower LGBT folk as well as help other folks understand differently oriented people in their families and communities. In 1988, the United Church of Canada voted at their National Assembly to welcome LGBT clergy.
1998, right?
1988.
88.
And lay people into full participation and leadership in the life of that denomination. Not all of their congregations were happy about this, but it pushed them all to revisit their values and how they related to people who were different from them. It also opened the closet door for a lot of clergy and lay people who had been hiding in fear at that point. There are now several denominations embracing LGBT folks. The Unitarian Universalists were the first, and others unofficially worked for the acceptance of same-gender marriage almost a decade ago.
But I guess I was very involved in teaching, and I always taught sexual orientation issues and gender identity issues. to medical students and to residents, and also to the public. And it was a public lecture that there was four lectures, and the one I gave was on human sexuality, and part of that was sexuality in adolescence, and I was focusing on gay and lesbians and the very high rate of suicide, etc., etc. And that's when Alberta Report got wind of it, and they interviewed me and managed to twist things around so that the headlines were that Dr. Warnke agrees with sex with minors as long as they consent, which was exactly the opposite of what I'd said. And as I said, William Gardner was this other homophobic columnist for the Journal and for the Herald. And I actually ended up on the Leslie Primo show, a radio show, and to talk about gay issues. And she said, do you mind, would you agree to having William Gardner patched in by telephone? And I took a big gulp. I said, I'm sure, what the hell, you know. And so we had this interview, three-way interview, and he made some comment that was implying that because I was interested in this topic, I must be gay. But he didn't actually say that. He was kind of crafty. And I said, well, it sounds like, Mr. Gardner, that, you know, you have a great interest in this because you're always writing about it in your column, you know. I wonder what that means, and left it at that. And I really think that was his last column he ever wrote, to be honest with you. But lots of other things went on over the years. I mean, I was involved with the Delvin Green trial, you know, as a behind the scenes and backing up Sheila Greco. Prior to that, a group of four of us tried to lobby the minister to change the Alberta human rights legislation over about 4 years. It didn't happen. I got involved with a case in St. That's not very medical, but which never went to trial, as it turned out. And on and on. And then I became more involved with the transgender community. And in 2009, the government suddenly announced that they took away the funding for sex reassignment surgery. And in the aftermath of that, there was a lot of articles in the paper, reference to me. I was in a couple of pictures, blah, 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 along with a lot of other people. But mention was made of the gender clinic at the Great Nuns Hospital. And I think this suddenly made the Archbishop of the Edmonton Diocese kind of wake up and realize that this was going on at the General Hospital. So I think, I don't know for sure, but my hunch is that he actually influenced the Covenant Health Board, who in turn influenced the administration at the hospital, who in turn tried to restrict my practice, saying that the dogma was that you should be happy with the body that God gave you and you shouldn't try to change it. And I actually remember this Catholic ethicist actually talking to me about this, and I said, well, what about the kids that have cleft palate? I mean, should they be happy with their bodies? What about club foot? I said, what about circumcision, for God's sake? It's been going on for years. But it created a really hostile environment at the Great Nuns Hospital, and but I just decided to hell with them. I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. I'm practicing good psychiatric medicine, addressing the needs of a marginated group, and my only concession is that I use my own letterhead and I don't refer publicly that Great Nuns Hospital has a gender clinic that I run.
Yes.
And there's been lots of other things that have happened. A lot of things. The transgender community need a lot of lobbying, a lot of letter writing, and we've been successful in getting things changed, like the Alberta Motor Vehicles legislation changed so they can change the gender marker on their driver's license before they have surgery. Now we've got the Vital Statistics Act to be changed, about to be changed. So you don't even have to have surgery to change the gender marker on your birth certificate, and so on. So all that's very good.
Yeah.
She and her partner had fostered over 70 children, and then they discovered that she was a lesbian, and then said, "Oh my gosh, we can't have that."
Right.
And after kicking a little provincial government ass, we were successful in turning that thing around too.
So we'll turn this to Murray. He's going to talk about activism and its importance in the community.
Thank you, Michael. never underestimate the power of one, I think is my most important message, because people talk about who we are as if we fell off a turnip truck or something. If there's something that I've learned in my 60 years on this planet, if you shake any family tree hard enough, the fruit's gonna fall out of it, let's face it. Now the difference is, back in the day it was, Barney and Robert. They never did find the right woman, but they're best of friends. Or the spinsters and those kinds of, Barbara and Betty over on the corner, the same kind of notions. And I think what we've seen over the years, particularly the last 20, 25 years, is an incremental change. And that only happened through political influence. And that political influence played out, let's talk Alberta specifically. It really played out specifically and largely and dramatically as a result of Delwyn Vren getting fired from King's College for being gay. And that college, all they had to do was make one small change and keep him employed, and things would have been different today, I do believe. Because what happened then, after he was fired, the provincial government said, we will not accept your complaint, because the human rights legislation in the mid-1990s did not have the word sexual orientation in it. So even that, back then, you could be denied an apartment, you could be fired for being gay, because sexual orientation was not in the provincial legislation. Quebec was the first to put it in 1978. So a very long story short, and many of you, put your hand up if you remember the Delwyn Vren case or are involved in it. I mean, take a look around, you guys. I mean, we made this happen in this province, and it's a badge of honor for every one of us. Because what happened with Delwyn's case was, he got fired, and the government said, no, we're not going to deal with it. We took them to court. We won at the first level of court. And Madam Justice Russell said at that time that we didn't even have to prove that discrimination against gay people was bad. She took judicial notice, which means you didn't even have to have evidence. She said it was justified, realized, and understood. It's a notorious fact of how we were discriminated against. Court of Appeal turned that back. And as the Court of Appeal turned that back, this community stood up, rose up, and we put sexual orientation on the breakfast tables, the dinner tables in the bars of Alberta and across this nation, because the story went national. It's kind of how I came out. I had no idea. I started doing media because nobody else would do it, because, and I wasn't real out back then, believe it or not. As a matter of fact, my dad back then said, it's bad enough Murray's gay, does he have to say it on television too? But what that did, you guys, and most of you understand this, we had that conversation across the province, across the country, and it changed the way people think. It really and truly did that. Now, the government of Alberta stood their ground, and we stood our ground, and the longer we went, and the more they pushed back, the more we grew, the more our allies grew. We raised money, we marched on the ledge, we sold cookies, we did everything we could to raise money to take on the provincial government. And at the end of the day, the Supreme Court of Canada told the government of Alberta, you must include sexual orientation in your human rights legislation. And that changed. Not just changed Alberta, you guys, it changed Canada, because subsequent to that, the rest of the provinces came on board. And then as a result of all of that, while that was going on, the little fellow over here said, let's go for a run at City Council. And we pulled a community together, and many of you are in this room as well. Who's worked on Michael's campaign? Come on. A lot of us have done that over the years. And that made a difference, because we had somebody making political decisions. And as a result of that, and my involvement with Gala and the board, and with the work with Gate and Gala over the years, and Lawrence, I mean, it's incremental, you guys. And that's how I ended up on the police commission. because they saw some, and I applied because I didn't think they'd give it to me, quite frankly. Who wants to do that? But that's partly how I ended up with the position, because I think they recognized the importance of having a diverse police commission, and it was such a badge of honor. And I want to say thank you to you and your families, because my success and Michael's success is as a result of everybody behind us making things happen. So it's just, that's a bit of a nutshell in terms of the importance of activism, but never underestimate the power of one. Those of you who know me, you've heard me say discrimination hinders coming out hinders discrimination.
What we're asking you really to do is open your closets. We want to hear your stories of being queer, being allies, making Edmonton the city it is today. And as part of this project, we have postcards, but if you want to get involved, I think the most important part is our email address, which Michael is going to put up right now so I can read it to you. EdmontonQueerHistoryProject@gmail.com.
I believe in mentors because I'm the sum total of a number of people that taught me how to be the man that I am, and everybody should be a mentor and have a mentor no matter what age you are. And I think it's something that happens naturally through our friendships, but what I'm seeing now are people like you, Lindu, coming up to people like me and say, can we have coffee and can we have a conversation? So I encourage you, if you meet somebody, younger or older, that needs some guidance, the best gift you can give somebody is a good listening to. And I honestly believe that more and more, it's not so much about gender or orientation or race or any of those things. There's absolutely some issues in that. I know, my friend Mark Tang and Christopher, they've been having conversations about the realities of discrimination in this city. And that's something that only is going to end when we have those crucial conversations. And so I just encourage people to help each other. And I know a number of people out here that continue to do that.
I do think that one of the things, my perspective is that as a queer community, we need to find ways to reach out to people of color, et cetera, who in other communities, and support and find ways to encourage them to be part of the community. We haven't done a whole lot of that, in my opinion, and there's a lot to be done with that.
The Friend case was just a remarkable study in building allies. Not just the United Church was an integral role. The Canadian Jewish Congress was there. There was a Catholic organization. The name doesn't. Dignity. Yeah, that was part of it. So it's part of, and I think the best way and the shortest way I can answer it is what Lyle Caney, Chief Counsel for the Canadian Jewish Congress, said at the Supreme Court of Canada. He said to everybody in that room and to Canada, the sooner that minorities can learn to hold hands and walk through the doors of equality together, the better off we will be. And that rings so true, and the church has really led the way, and it took some very brave people like you, Rob, to stand up in your church and say, what about us? Because, how many times in our lives, each person here, I know when I was a farm boy in Moose Jaw, I thought I was the only gay in the village. And then I thought I was the only guy to get married and have kids. I thought I was the only one in the world that would let something like that happen. But it's part of being a welcoming community, and that's what makes a really big difference. Is lead with kindness, and I don't think you can